mouth of God. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, King of endless glory.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Filled with the Holy Spirit, Jesus returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the desert for 40 days to be tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and when they were over, he was hungry. The devil said to him, "If you are truly the Son of God, command this stone to become bread." Jesus answered him, "It is written, one does not live on bread alone." Then he took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a single instant. The devil said, "I shall give you all this power and glory, for it has been handed over to me, and I may give it to whomever I wish. All this will be yours if you worship me." Jesus said to him in reply, "It is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him alone shall you serve." Then he led him to Jerusalem, made him stand on the parapet of the temple, and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you, and with their hands they will support you, lest you dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him in reply, "It also says, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test." When the devil had finished every temptation, he departed from him for a time. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Please be seated. I'd like to reiterate what Father Jack said. I wish you all a happy Valentine's Day, and I too love you all very much. And I'd like to also tell you that Jane and I received a very wonderful Valentine present at 6:25 this morning. Finley Rose at 9 pounds. Joined the Alley clan.
Congratulations.
And if Jane thought Victoria was a handful, wait till this one shows up and starts walking. But we all like to receive gifts, right? Especially on occasions like Christmas, birthdays, things like that. But we get just a little bit leery when someone just unexpectedly wants to give us a gift, or just out of the blue wants to do us a favor, right? That's because it's just human nature to want to keep the scales balanced. In other words, we don't want to owe anybody, and we don't want anybody owing us. We want to keep those scales perfectly balanced. But sometimes, in a weak moment, we might give in to temptation. Like when the person calls and says, "We just want a free cruise to the Bahamas." And we fall for it, only to find out that that free cruise isn't as free as we thought, and there's all kinds of strings attached. And unfortunately, there's people out there in this world that are constantly trying to find ways to take advantage of people. But that's just the opposite of what we are about as Christians. And what gives us hope is that on a daily basis, we hear about and we see acts of giving and charity. And I'd like to cite a couple of examples. Recently at this school in Texas, this young female student was having a severe asthma attack. Per protocol, the teacher told all the students to sit down, and you're going to love this. She emailed the principal and the nurse about a medical emergency. And as they were waiting, this young girl passed out and fell out of her chair. Well, this one 15-year-old male student immediately picked her up and carried her to the nurse's office, where they gave her CPR and revived her. And oh, by the way, the male student was suspended from school for disobeying to stay in their seats. Then there was this principal in Indiana. Some of you might have heard of this. After school, she was just going around checking everybody, and she saw an out-of-control bus coming towards some students that were waiting at the curb. She immediately ran in front of the bus and pushed the kids out of the way. Fortunately, she paid the ultimate sacrifice for that heroic and giving kind of way that she did it. And what I would like to say now is that these kinds of acts and attitudes carry over into our understanding of faith and salvation, especially at Lent. We perceive this season as a time to make amends and to perform acts of devotion that will balance the scales. But if we really look closely into the readings of Lent, we will see that God does not require this at all. That's because salvation is a gift from God, not some reward that has to be earned so that the scales will be tipped one way or the other. In all of the first readings of the Sundays of Lent, talk about the history of the Israelites and shows God's saving grace for them. And today's reading is a perfect example of that. It talks about how God delivered the people from the bondage of Egypt. And when God did this, He didn't tell the people, hey, the scales are now tipped in my favor. You're going to owe me now for a long time, forever as a matter of fact. Because when we read these passages, we see that God never demands a quid pro quo. Because with God, there are never any strings attached. So what do these readings tell us about Lent? They highlight not what we can do for God, but what God has done for us. These readings ask us to open our hearts in faith and trust and recommit ourselves to God. Not because we want to pay our debt off and balance the scales, because in God's eyes, there are no scales. It's because the readings ask us to open our eyes to the fact that God is our refuge and our strength. The one who says that if there were scales, they would always be tipped in our favor. Please stand.
I believe
in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible and